Here are a couple of models that mean a great deal to me. The Messerschmitt on the right. My very first car was one of these, and I had it in 1963, I think it was. And in the mid-1990s I restored another one, so that's a great deal of fun and exploration into the world of motoring. And the one on the left hand side is a Heinkel bubble car. And again, I restored one of those in the 1990s, and it gave me a great deal of fun and pleasure. It's a kind of motoring that was only around for a few years and then quickly disappeared, which was a shame because it gave you maximum miles per gallon, and using the engines from scooters that we'd all got very familiar with in the 1950s and 60s. On the left you see an original dinky toy from the 1950s, perhaps from the 1940s even. But when I was a young lad, I used to save up all my pocket money and buy one of these dinky buses. They were 5 shillings, so it took me several weeks to save up, and then I'd buy another one. And eventually got told off by my mother by, why you keep buying so many of the same thing? It's just that I seem to like buses, and I wanted my own little bus station and layout. And the nice red one on the left, on the right hand side, is a modern model of a Plymouth Corporation bus where I lived, and for some reason they seem to be always very smart buses. I much preferred the red and cream colour scheme to the Western National's green, which was in the area. But here are another 2 models then that mean a lot to me. This is a model of a dinky flatbed truck manufactured by Guy. This was a dinky super toy, which was a slightly larger scale than the normal dinky toys, and thought to be the ultimate dinkies at the time. This is another famous shape from the 1950s, the Bedford OB. Again, we had a coach firm in Plymouth called the Embankment, and they had a fleet of these, and if ever we were going to somewhere special, it was usually in an Embankment OB. In the mid-1960s, my very first 4-wheeler car was a Volkswagen Beetle. It was a lovely black and chrome one, as the model on the right hand side. It was air-cooled, of course, as they were in those days, and I felt at home having air-cooled engines in the various scooters and bubble cars that I'd had. The model on the left hand side is a Fiat Multipla. Back in the mid-70s and 80s, I had a session of little Fiat cars, a Fiat 500 and a Fiat 126. But Fiats were really ahead of the game in those days because they produced this little Multipla, which could take, I think, about 8 passengers, which is quite unheard of in an ordinary car before. It was really an advanced design. Engine in the rear. I think if I remember, the spare wheel was in the front of the driver's knees or the passenger's knees, but it was revolutionary really, and the forerunner of all the modern people carriers. Here's a dinky toy from the 1950s of a Bedford OB type front. It was a little tipper lorry, and that used to impress me because of the fact that a lorry was a useful enough thing. It would carry your loads anywhere, but this one would actually tip out your load when it got there, which I thought was a very clever idea. The first time I ever went abroad, it was to France at the age of 17, and I was very surprised and pleased to find that dinky toys were available in France as well. And this is a famous Citroën H van that was very common on the roads at that time. Up to then I'd never seen one before. Here's a couple of motor scooters from the 1950s. In 1958 I really wanted a Michaeletta like the one on the right, but my parents, who were after all having to find most of the money, said no, you can't have anything German. How would you get the spares into England? It's so far away. So I couldn't have one of those, but in the 1990s I restored one, so I did eventually get a Michaeletta, and it was a really great scooter to ride, and it had one weak link, and that was a 6-volt electrical system, so it could be a so-and-so to start. It didn't have a kickstart, which was its great drawback. If the little 6-volt battery happened to be a little bit low, you just had to run with it to start it. And on the right is a Heinkel scooter, a Heinkel Tourist. I restored one of those in the 1990s. That was a beautiful machine. That also didn't have a kickstart, but for some reason the 12-volt system on that was superb. Even with an almost flat battery, it would start the engine. It was really an excellent machine. Rather expensive to buy in its original 1960s, but real pleasure. Large, just like the Michaeletta, really large dual seat, plenty of space, really stable, a fine machine. And here is the typical Guy Arab bus that used to run around Plymouth, and indeed in lots of other different cities. They were a little bit cruder than some of the later Leylands, but with the Gardner engine they were quite powerful, and some had little tiny piggy eyes like this one, headlamps. Others are much larger ones. But I used to look out of my bedroom window at these great monsters going by, and it used to really impress me. Because I think at that time, when I was growing up, there was only one car in the whole of our street. And that was only parked out on Sundays for the neighbours to see. And we went everywhere by double-decker bus. Here are a couple more of those excellent recollection scooter models. Vespa GS, which was a very important scooter back in the 1950s. And we've got the BSA Sunbeam, and I did actually restore the BSA Sunbeam myself. And also a Vespa Rally. This is a model of a half-cab coach from the 1950s. This one's in the livery of grey cars from Torquay, and they very often used to come through Plymouth on their journeys. They're in Devon and Cornwall. And it was used to amaze me really how this half-cab design looks so different as a single-decker to a double-decker. But I always meant the luxury side of motoring in a way. Some of the early double-deckers were a little bit crude and bouncy and noisy, but when you got to the coach version, it was usually very comfortable. There's a little Isetta in the background here, but the main star really is the BMC Mini. We've had 3 over the years. Our first one cost £48, which we had to restore. We later had a Mini Club in the State, which was a very nice little car, and we toured all around Scotland in that one, mostly in the rain of course. I still remember the the sound of rain beating on the roof of that car. And then we restored our Wolseley Hornet, which is a little Mini with a boot. And over here, modern classic, the smart car. A great modern microcar with good miles per gallon, low pollution, very efficient engine with a turbocharger, 600cc, although it's now gone up to 1000 I believe, and a real step forward in personal motoring. These are 2 modern models. The one on the left hand side is a me.I, which is the kind of car I currently drive. It's a Japanese adaptation of the smart car. It'll carry 4 passengers instead of the 2 in the normal smart. They've developed the smart engine to give it much smoother performance and more powerful performance, yet still retain the 600cc engine and the road tax, therefore £35 a year. And the little car on the right is a Daihatsu Midget, which is a very small engine little car. My wife in fact drives a Daihatsu Syrian, but as yet we've been unable to find a model of a Syrian. But the little Daihatsu Midget is very characteristic of what Daihatsu have produced. Small cars, very efficient, small engined, very individual.